Most people walk past homeless people without a second thought. But what if that stranger on the street corner was someone you'd been searching for your entire life? This businessman was about to find out in the most heartbreaking way possible. Michael Chen wasn't always the guy in the $1,000 suit stepping out of luxury cars. 28 years ago, he was just a scared 6-year-old kid clutching a teddy bear in a group home, wondering why his mom never came back. The social workers told him she abandoned him at a shopping mall, that she just walked away and never looked back. For years, that story ate him alive. How could a mother do that to her own child? How could someone who used to tuck him in at night, who used to kiss his scraped knees, who used to make him pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, just decide one day that he wasn't worth it anymore? But Michael didn't let that define him. At least, that's what he told himself. He fought his way through the foster care system, bouncing between 7 different homes before he aged out at 18. Some families were okay, some were terrible. Most just didn't care. He was a paycheck to them, a tax write-off. So he learned not to get attached, learned not to call anyone mom or dad, learned to keep his head down and survive. He worked 3 jobs to put himself through community college, slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen and coffee, but he made it. Transferred to a 4-year school, got a degree in computer science, started working at a tech startup in Seattle. And when that startup got bought out by a bigger company, Michael took his payout and started his own business, an app that helped connect foster kids with resources and support systems, something he wished existed when he was growing up. By 34, he had everything. A penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. A Tesla in the garage, a Rolex on his wrist. More money in his bank account than he ever imagined possible. He'd been featured in Forbes, spoke at conferences, had investors begging to give him money. But there was always this empty space inside him, this question that wouldn't go away no matter how successful he became. What really happened that day at the mall? Why did his mother leave him? He'd hired private investigators over the years, 3 different ones. They all came back with nothing. No death certificate, no marriage records, no credit history. It was like Sarah Chen just vanished into thin air after that day in 1997. Some of them suggested she might be dead, living under a different name, out of the country. One investigator even suggested she might be in prison, but there were no records, no trail. Nothing. Michael's therapist told him he needed to let it go, that he was holding on to this anger and abandonment, and it was poisoning everything good in his life. That's why his relationships never worked out. That's why he couldn't trust anyone. That's why he worked himself to exhaustion instead of actually living. He was running from the pain of being unwanted. The therapist was probably right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your gut are 2 different things. The answer would come on a Tuesday morning in October, in the most unexpected way possible. Michael was running late for a board meeting. His company was about to close a major funding round, and the investors wanted to discuss expansion plans. His driver texted that he was stuck in traffic on the I-5. Accident up ahead, wasn't moving. Michael checked his watch. The meeting started in 20 minutes. His office was only 8 blocks away. He could walk it in 12 minutes if he hurried. So he got out of the car and started walking. It was one of those perfect Seattle fall mornings, crisp air, blue sky, the kind of day that makes you forget about the 9 months of gray rain. People were out getting coffee, walking dogs, heading to work, everyone in their own little bubble. Michael was checking emails on his phone, barely paying attention to where he was going. That's when he saw her. An older woman, maybe late 50s, early 60s, sitting against a brick wall outside a closed storefront. Her clothes were dirty and torn, multiple layers even though it wasn't that cold yet. A heavy coat that looked like it came from a donation bin, pants that were too big held up with a piece of rope, shoes with holes in them. Her hair was gray and matted, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was weathered and sunburned in that way that happens when you live outside too long. She had a cardboard sign propped up against her knees, but Michael couldn't read what it said from where he was standing. She wasn't holding it up like most homeless people do, wasn't shaking a cup at passersby. She just sat there, with her head tilted back against the wall, eyes half closed, humming something. Michael had seen hundreds of homeless people in Seattle. Thousands, probably. It was impossible not to. The city had a massive homelessness problem. Tent cities under overpasses, people sleeping in doorways. It was sad, sure, but what could one person do? He donated to charities. His company volunteered at shelters during the holidays. He voted for politicians who promised to address the issue. That was enough, right? But something made him stop that morning. Maybe it was the way she was humming, a soft melody that sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Maybe it was the fact that she wasn't aggressively panhandling like some of the others. She just sat there, lost in her own world, humming that tune. Maybe it was the guilt he always felt when he walked past homeless people in his expensive clothes, knowing that he had so much and they had nothing. He pulled out his wallet and grabbed a $20 bill. As he bent down to hand it to her, she looked up at him. And for just a second, maybe half a second, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Surprise? He couldn't tell. But then it was gone, and she went right back to staring at the ground, still humming that melody. "Here," Michael said, holding out the bill. "Get yourself something warm to eat." She took the bill without saying thank you, without even really acknowledging him. Just reached out with a dirty, scarred hand and folded it carefully before tucking it into her coat pocket. Then she went back to humming. Up close, Michael could see how sick she looked. Her skin had a grayish tint. Her lips were chapped and bleeding. Her nail fingers were broken and dirty. There was a vacant quality to her eyes, like she was looking at him but not really seeing him. "Are you okay?" Michael asked. "Do you need help? I can call someone." She didn't respond. Just kept humming. Kept staring at nothing. Michael stood there for a moment, feeling strange. Like he should say something else, do something else. But what? He wasn't a social worker. He didn't know how to help someone like this. And he had a meeting to get to. Important people waiting for him. Millions of dollars on the line. So he walked away, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling in his chest. But that melody stayed in his head all morning. Through the entire board meeting, while investors were talking about market penetration and user acquisition and profit margins, he kept hearing it. That soft, sad humming. Where did he know that song from? It was driving him crazy. He found himself humming it under his breath during a presentation about quarterly projections. "Michael, are you with us?" one of the board members asked. "Yeah, sorry, just thinking." But he wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about that melody and those eyes. The way she looked at him for just a split second before going vacant again, like she was drowning and came up for air just long enough to see the sky before sinking back under. It hit him during lunch. He was sitting in his office, eating a salad that he didn't taste, staring out at the city skyline. And suddenly he was 6 years old again, lying in a twin bed in a dark room, crying because he'd had a nightmare. And there was a woman's voice, soft and warm, singing to him. That melody, that exact melody, a lullaby in Mandarin that he didn't understand the words to anymore, but the tune was burned into his memory. The last good memory he had before everything fell apart. His chest tightened. His hand started shaking so bad he dropped his fork. That melody, it was the lullaby, the one from his earliest memories, the one a woman's voice used to sing to him in the dark when he was scared, before the group home, before the foster families, before everything fell apart. His mother's lullaby. No, it couldn't be. There were probably thousands of women who knew that lullaby. It was probably a common Chinese lullaby. His mother wasn't the only person in the world who knew it. This was just a coincidence. His therapist had warned him about this, about seeing connections that weren't there because he wanted so badly to find answers, because he was so desperate for closure that his brain would create patterns out of random noise. He was projecting. That's all. But Michael couldn't focus the rest of the day. During an investor call, he completely zoned out, and his CFO had to cover for him. During a product demo, he gave completely wrong information about features. His assistant asked him 3 times if he was feeling okay. By 3 in the afternoon, he told her to cancel his remaining meetings. He had to know. Even if it made him look crazy, even if it meant nothing, even if he was setting himself up for disappointment, he had to go back to that corner and talk to her.
When he got there, she was still sitting in the same spot, still humming. The sun had moved and she was in shadow now, looking even smaller and more fragile than she had that morning. He bought 2 cups of coffee from the shop across the street and a couple of breakfast sandwiches, took a deep breath, and sat down next to her on the cold concrete, not caring that his $2,000 suit was getting dirty. She didn't react, didn't even look at him, just kept humming and staring at the wall across the street. "Hi," he said, his voice not quite steady. "I'm Michael. I gave you some money this morning. I just wanted to check if you're okay. And I brought you some food and coffee. I didn't know how you take it, so I got cream and sugar on the side." Nothing. She kept humming, kept staring, like he wasn't even there. Michael set the coffee and food down next to her, waited. Still nothing. He was about to give up, feeling like an idiot when he heard himself ask, "That song you're humming, it's pretty. Where did you learn it?" Her humming stopped. The sudden silence was jarring. She turned her head slowly, like it took enormous effort, and looked at him with those distant eyes. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, just studied his face with an expression he couldn't read. Then, in a voice that sounded like it hadn't been used in years, rough and cracked, she whispered, "My son. I used to sing it to my son." Michael's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his chest. His palms were sweating. His mouth was dry. "What's your name?" She looked confused, like she had to think about it, like she wasn't sure. "Sarah? I think my name is Sarah." Sarah. His mother's name was Sarah Chen. But lots of people were named Sarah. This didn't mean anything, except the lullaby, and the lost son, and those eyes. The more he looked at her, the more he saw something familiar in the shape of her face, in the way she tilted her head, in the curve of her nose. Features he'd seen in old photographs, features he saw every day in his own reflection. "Sarah, can I ask you something? What's your last name?" She shook her head, looking distressed now. "I don't remember. I don't remember a lot of things. The doctor said my brain is broken, that I can't hold on to memories right. They come and go like dreams. Sometimes I remember everything so clearly it hurts, and sometimes I don't even know my own name. Do you remember your son's name?" She closed her eyes. A tear finally rolled down her weathered cheek, leaving a clean trail through the dirt. "Michael. My baby boy was named Michael. He was 6 years old. He loved dinosaurs. He had this laugh that sounded like bells. He used to curl up in my lap and ask me to sing to him. And I did. Every night. The same song my mother sang to me." The world stopped. Everything around him went silent. The traffic, the people walking by, the construction noise from down the street, all of it just disappeared. Michael couldn't hear anything except the blood rushing in his ears. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of cruel joke, some kind of nightmare. But when he looked at her face, at the tears now streaming down her dirty cheeks, at the way her whole body was shaking, he knew. Somewhere deep in his soul, he just knew. "Mom?"
The word came out broken, cracked right down the middle. He hadn't said that word in 28 years. Hadn't let himself think it. And now here it was, spilling out of him like a wound opening. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. The vacancy in her eyes cleared like fog burning off in sunlight. She stared at his face, her eyes moving over every feature. His nose, his eyes, his mouth. Her hand came up, shaking violently, and touched his face. Her fingers were ice cold and rough against his skin. Michael? My Michael? And then she broke. She collapsed into sobs, deep, painful sobs that sounded like they'd been trapped inside her for decades, like a dam breaking. Her whole body shook with the force of them. She tried to speak but couldn't get words out, just kept crying and touching his face like she couldn't believe he was real. Michael pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried, while they both cried. Right there on that dirty sidewalk with strangers walking by, staring at them. Some people looked concerned, some looked uncomfortable, some took out their phones. He didn't care. He just held his mother and cried into her matted hair and felt 28 years of pain and anger and loneliness pour out of him. When she could finally speak again, the story came out in pieces. Broken fragments that Michael had to put together like a puzzle. Some parts she remembered clearly, some parts were fuzzy. Some parts were just gone, lost in the fog of mental illness and trauma. That day at the mall, she didn't abandon him. She had a psychotic break. She'd been having symptoms for months before that, hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there, but she didn't have health insurance, couldn't afford to see a doctor. And she was scared that if she told anyone, they'd take Michael away. So she tried to push through it, tried to be a good mom, tried to keep it together. But that day in the toy store, something in her brain just snapped. One minute she was holding his hand, looking at action figures. Michael wanted a T-Rex. She remembered that detail clearly. He wanted a blue T-Rex. And the next minute, she was somewhere else. Not physically, mentally. The voices got so loud she couldn't hear anything else. The world around her stopped making sense. She wandered away. Didn't know who she was, didn't know where she was, didn't know she had a son standing in a toy store looking for his mommy. By the time mall security found her hours later, she was in the parking lot, completely disoriented. She couldn't tell them her name, couldn't tell them anything. They called the police. The police took her to the hospital. The doctors diagnosed her with acute psychosis. They found Michael's missing person report, found out she had a son. But by then she couldn't remember him. The trauma of the break had wiped out huge chunks of her memory. They showed her pictures of Michael. She didn't recognize him. They put her in a psychiatric hospital, diagnosed her with severe schizophrenia and dissociative amnesia. She spent 2 years in that first hospital, then another hospital, then a group home. Her memories started coming back in pieces. Flashes, dreams, the little boy's laugh, dinosaur toys, making pancakes, singing a lullaby. But she couldn't put it all together. Couldn't remember who the little boy was, just knew she had lost something. Important. Someone important. When her memories finally came back enough for her to remember Michael, to remember being a mother, it was too late. The state had already terminated her parental rights. Michael had been adopted. The adoption records were sealed. She tried to find him, spent years trying, hired lawyers with money she didn't have, went into debt, lost her apartment, but without resources, without money, without even being able to hold down a job because of her condition, she had no chance. The voices never went away completely. The medications helped, but they made her feel like a zombie. And she couldn't afford them anyway when she lost her job. Eventually, she ended up on the streets, and that's where she'd been for the last 15 years. Homeless, sick, alone, in and out of shelters, in and out of hospitals when the psychosis got really bad. But even on her worst days, even when she didn't know her own name, she remembered that lullaby. It was the one thing that stayed constant. So she hummed it every day, like a prayer, like a lifeline, still thinking about the son she lost, the son she failed, the son who must hate her. Michael couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was hearing. All those years he thought she abandoned him, hated her for leaving him, built his entire identity around being the kid whose mother didn't want him. And she'd been suffering this whole time? Looking for him? Living on the streets? Sick? And alone? The guilt hit him like a truck. If he'd looked harder, if he'd searched for her instead of trying to forget her, if he'd hired better investigators, maybe he could have found her sooner, saved her from years on the streets, years of suffering. But Sarah shook her head violently. No, baby, no, you were a child. This wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. I'm your mother. I was supposed to protect you. I was supposed to keep you safe. And I failed you.
I failed you in the worst way possible. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But you have to know it wasn't your fault. You didn't fail me, Michael said, crying so hard he could barely speak. You got sick. You couldn't control that. The system failed us. Everyone failed us, but you didn't abandon me. That changes everything. Do you understand? That changes everything. They sat there on that sidewalk for 2 hours, talking, crying. Sarah told him everything she could remember. Michael told her about his life, about foster care, about college, about his company. She listened with tears streaming down her face, apologizing over and over for missing it all, for not being there. Michael kept telling her it wasn't her fault, kept saying it until maybe, just maybe, some part of her started to believe it. When it started getting dark, Michael made a decision. You're not staying out here tonight. I'm taking you to a hotel. We're getting you cleaned up, getting you some food, and tomorrow we're going to figure this out. Sarah looked terrified. I can't. I don't do well inside. The walls close in. The voices get louder. I'll have an episode. I'll scare you. You'll realize what a mess I am and leave. I'm not leaving you, Michael said firmly. I just found you. After 28 years, I just found you. I'm not letting you go. I don't care about episodes. I don't care about voices. You're my mom, and we're going to figure this out together. He took her to a hotel near his apartment, got her a suite. The desk clerk looked at them suspiciously. This man in an expensive suit with this homeless woman. Michael didn't care. He paid for a week up front, helped Sarah inside. She was shaking the whole time, looking around like she expected someone to attack her. He helped her into the bathroom, started running water for a bath. She just stood there, overwhelmed, like she'd forgotten how bathrooms worked, how normal life worked. Michael realized this was going to be harder than he thought. You don't spend 15 years on the streets and just bounce back. The trauma runs deep, changes you. He called a friend who was a doctor, explained the situation. The friend came over within an hour, brought another doctor who specialized in psychiatry. They examined Sarah gently, carefully. She was severely malnourished, had frostbite on her toes from last winter, pneumonia, infected cuts on her feet, untreated diabetes. The list went on and on. The psychiatrist said she needed to be hospitalized, not in a psych ward, but in a regular hospital to treat the physical issues first. Then they could work on the mental health. Sarah panicked at the word hospital, started having a breakdown. Michael held her. I'll be there. every day. I promise I'm not leaving you, but you need help. Please, let us help you." She finally agreed, but only if Michael promised to stay with her. So he did. Called his assistant, told her to clear his schedule for the week, didn't explain why, didn't care what anyone thought. His company could survive without him for a few days. This couldn't. The hospital keeps Sarah for 3 weeks, treated the pneumonia, the infections, got her blood sugar under control, started her on new medications for the schizophrenia, medications that were better than what she'd been on years ago, that had fewer side effects. They set her up with a psychiatrist and a therapist, started working through the trauma. Michael was there every day, sometimes all day. He worked from her hospital room, took calls in the hallway. His assistant thought he was losing his mind. His board members were concerned, but Michael didn't care. For the first time in his life, something mattered more than work, more than success, more than money. Sarah had good days and bad days. Some days she was lucid and they could talk for hours. She'd ask him about his life, his company, if he was happy, if he'd found love, if he had friends, if he felt safe. She cried when he told him about some of the foster homes, about the abuse, the neglect. She blamed herself even though he kept telling her it wasn't her fault. Other days she didn't recognize him, didn't know where he was, thought he was a stranger trying to hurt her, thought the nurses were poisoning her, tried to escape. Those days broke his heart over and over again. But he didn't give up. He just sat with her until the episode passed, until the medication kicked in, until she came back to him. The therapist explained that it would take time, years maybe. The dissociative amnesia might never fully resolve. She might always have gaps in her memory. The schizophrenia was manageable with medication, but she'd probably always have symptoms, hear voices, have paranoid thoughts. It was about learning to cope, learning to recognize what was real and what wasn't, building a support system, creating stability. After 3 weeks, the hospital discharged her. Michael had spent that time finding her a place to live. Not just any place, a small house in a quiet neighborhood. 1 story, so she wouldn't have to deal with stairs, a fenced yard with a garden. He'd read that gardening helped with mental health, that having something to take care of, something to nurture, helped people heal. He hired a case manager to help her navigate the medical system, set up all her appointments, made sure she had transportation, made sure she had everything she needed. The first day in the house, Sarah walked through every room crying. She couldn't believe it was real, kept thinking it was a dream that she'd wake up on the sidewalk. Michael showed her the deed with her name on it, showed her the keys. "It's yours, Mom. No one can take it away from you. You're safe now." She broke down, clung to him. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you after what I did." "You didn't do anything wrong," Michael said for the 1,000th time. "You got sick, and now you're getting better. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The first few months were rough, really rough. Sarah would have panic attacks in the middle of the night. Michael would get calls from the crisis line. He'd drive over at 2 in the morning and find her in the garden, talking to people who weren't there. He'd gently guide her inside, remind her to take her medication, sit with her until dawn. Some days, she couldn't get out of bed. The depression was crippling, the weight of everything she'd lost, everything she'd missed. Michael's childhood, his adolescence, his graduation, his first job, all of it gone. She'd never get those years back. Neither would he, and that grief was overwhelming. But there were good days too. Days where she was just Mom, where they could sit together and she'd tell him stories about when he was a baby, about his father who died in a car accident when Michael was 3. He didn't remember his father at all, but Sarah did. She told him how they met, how he proposed, what kind of father he was in those early years. She told him he had his father's eyes, his father's stubborn streak. She told him about her own childhood in Taiwan, about immigrating to the United States when she was 20, about how hard it was, how lonely, how she worked 3 jobs to survive, how she met his father at one of those jobs, how they fell in love even though her English was terrible and her Mandarin was worse, how happy they were when Michael was born, how everything felt perfect until the car accident, until she lost her husband and became a single mother overnight. She told him about the early signs of schizophrenia that she didn't recognize, the voices she thought were just stress, the paranoia she thought was just grief, how she tried so hard to keep it together, to be a good mom, to give Michael a normal life, how she failed. Michael listened to all of it, and slowly, piece by piece, he put together a picture of who his mother was. Not the woman who abandoned him, but a woman who loved him, who fought for him, who lost everything, including her own mind, but never stopped loving him, never stopped singing that lullaby, never stopped hoping. A year later, Sarah was doing better. Not perfect. She still had bad days, days where the voices were loud, days where she couldn't tell what was real, but she had more good days than bad now. The medications were working. The therapy was helping. She'd even made a friend at the community center, another woman with schizophrenia. They'd go to support groups together. She'd started painting. Nothing fancy, just watercolors, but it gave her something to do, something to focus on when her mind got noisy. Michael visited 3 times a week. They had dinner together, watched old movies. Sometimes they just sat in silence. And sometimes when she was having a really good day, she'd sing him that lullaby. The one that brought them back together. The one that saved both of their lives. She'd sing it in Mandarin, and he'd close his eyes and remember being 6 years old, being safe, being loved. Michael learned something during that year. He learned that the world isn't black and white, that sometimes people don't abandon you because they want to. Sometimes life is just cruel and breaks people in ways they can't control. His mother didn't leave him. She got sick, and the system that was supposed to help her failed both of them. If there had been better mental health care, if there had been a safety net, if society didn't treat mental illness like a moral failing,
Maybe things would have been different. He also learned that it's never too late. Never too late to find someone. Never too late to forgive. Never too late to love. If he'd walked past her that morning, if he'd let his anger and hurt keep him from stopping, he would have missed this. Missed having his mom back in his life. Missed the chance to give her a good life after so many years of suffering. Missed the chance to heal. Because he was healing too. That empty space inside him was filling up. That question that had haunted him for 28 years had an answer. And the answer wasn't that he was unlovable. The answer was that sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and all you can do is survive. And if you're lucky, really lucky, you get a second chance. The cardboard sign Sarah was holding that day is framed in Michael's office now. It said, "Anything helps, God bless." Simple. Like thousands of other signs held by thousands of other people on thousands of other street corners. He keeps it there to remind himself. To remind himself that every person on the street has a story. That you never know who someone used to be before life broke them. That sometimes the person you've been searching for your whole life is right in front of you, and all you have to do is stop and see them. His company now donates heavily to mental health organizations, to homeless shelters, to programs that help people like his mother. Michael speaks at fundraisers, tells his story, not for sympathy, but to raise awareness, to make people understand that homelessness isn't always about laziness or addiction or bad choices. Sometimes it's about mental illness, about a system that fails people, about falling through the cracks. And he challenges people to stop walking past, to see the humans behind the cardboard signs, to show up for people who have nothing. Sarah says she doesn't remember much about those years on the street. The brain has a way of protecting you from trauma, of making you forget the worst parts. But she remembers one thing, clearly. She remembers humming that lullaby every single day. Because somewhere deep in her broken mind, some part of her knew that if she just kept singing it, maybe somehow, some way, her son would hear it. Maybe the universe would bring him back to her. And it did. 28 years later, he finally heard it. And he came back to her. Michael still thinks about that morning, about how close he came to not stopping. If his driver hadn't been stuck in traffic, if he hadn't decided to walk, if he'd taken a different route, if he'd been 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, they never would have found each other. Sarah would have died on that corner, and Michael would have spent the rest of his life wondering what happened to her. The thought makes him feel sick. But he did stop. Something made him stop. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was that lullaby calling out to him across the years, across the pain, across the impossible distance between who they were and who they'd become. Whatever it was, it gave them both a second chance. A chance to be a family again. A chance to heal. A chance to love each other despite everything that had happened, despite all the years they'd lost. And that's what they're doing now. Healing. Together. It's not perfect. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes really hard. Some days, Sarah calls him crying because she had a nightmare. Some days, she's convinced the neighbors are spying on her, and he has to talk her down. Some days, she doesn't remember who he is. But it's real. And after 28 years of questions and pain and emptiness, real is enough. Real is everything. They'll never get back those lost years. Michael will never have his mom at his high school graduation, at his college graduation, at any of the big moments of his life. Sarah will never get to see her little boy grow up. They both carry that grief. Probably always will. But they have now. They have today. They have tomorrow. And they're making new memories. Better memories. Memories of healing and forgiveness and love that survived the worst possible circumstances. So the next time you see someone on the street, someone who looks lost or broken or invisible, just remember, that could be someone's mother, someone's father, someone's child, someone who used to have a life and a family and dreams before everything fell apart. Someone who's surviving the best way they know how. And maybe, just maybe, by stopping and seeing them, by treating them like a human being instead of a problem to step over, you might change both of your lives forever. Just like Michael did. On that Tuesday morning in October, when he heard a lullaby and found his way home.